Welcome back, everybody, to Catechumens Depart. I'm Eric Anderson.
Father Mark Kozak from Assumption of the Holy Virgin Mary Parish in South Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That's on the East Coast, by the way.
Where is that again?
East Coast.
East Coast. They
the
wrote
megapolis.
They wrote some documents there. Oh, let's see. I'm still back and forth between calendars because I'm at a new calendar church and an old calendar church. But Christ is born. I think you're supposed
glorify him.
Okay, I was like, I think you're supposed to say that to me.
I am sorry.
It's
Christ
okay.
is born, but I can't say it to him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope you all had a nice nativity. We're on the eve of, oh, thank God, the 2020 is wrapping up. So almost Happy New Year to everybody tuning in. Hope you had a good holiday season, saw family or did what you could. We are continuing our exit from Machine World series here on and talking more about symbolism. We talked a bunch about icons and then sort of the symbolism of countries and what that means last time. And we had ended, I was thinking we might talk somewhat about why does Christ in the Bible always speak in parable and metaphor and like obliquely? I want to start there. And it was, I was listening to this podcast that I like yesterday, Lord of Spirits. I was doing some catching up on my podcasts, and they were specifically talking about the Council of Heaven and all of this, but they were talking about our tendency in the modern era to try to basically stick a poem into a spreadsheet because we view things in grids and hierarchical sort of like chopped up things, and they're like, that's not the way you approach this. And I think that as we work on trying to enter into the Christian story as modern people, we're trying to put the spreadsheet away. And we talked a bit about icons and how that helps us, and there's a lot more to go on, but I want to start with the most important thing, which is Christ, and why Christ speaks the way that he does, because he doesn't give us lists of rules or precepts or things, pharisaical things, right, to go by. It's these weird stories. Like, what's going on with that, Father Mark? How can we start to look at the way that Christ speaks to us in the scriptures as like a way to view Christianity and the way that we're supposed to be in the world?
Well, I think the story leads us to a full spiritual life. It like opens the door or opens the crack. The greatest example of this, I know it's a little early to be thinking about Lent. It's never too early to think about Lent.
Dang it. I like ham. Sorry.
So do I. But we spend our pre-Lent going through parables.
Yeah.
We spend our time after Pentecost, after 40 days of Paschal Tide, 10 days of being waiting for Pentecost, and Pentecost, a week of feasting and everything, and then we get into parables, and then we get into these stories. I mean, why? What does the publican and the Pharisee have to do with me?
Right.
I'm not like either of those. Well, yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Because really, we're like both of them.
Right.
Or we should be like both of them.
Yeah.
So that's where the symbol that Jesus wants us to be thinking about and fulfilling in our lives, that's where it's infused with case of the publican and the Pharisee, with the publican's humility. So you don't, in Father Schmeman's book, this is what the titles are: publican, Pharisee, humility.
Mm-hmm.
So what you have to know. So to get that key, you don't need this. And thank you for the spreadsheet analogy. That is great. I often use the box analogy. We
Yeah.
don't need put Jesus in, Jesus is humble, so we've got to be humble, and that's in that box.
Yeah.
And da da da. No. Humility infuses the publican.
Mm-hmm.
It opens his eyes towards who God is and what his relationship is to God.
Mm-hmm.
It does so many things. So the parable isn't just a story. It's a key to a lock, really.
Yeah. Well,
So
go ahead.
no, go ahead. That's okay.
Well, and because I know at the church out here, Father Ephraim was talking a few weeks ago about the Good Samaritan, which we've all probably heard about 800 billion times. It feels like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, but he's like, there's also these different layers of like the church fathers talking about, and they always are doing this. They're always on about like, well, Jericho symbolizes a life of being given over to the passions. And then the Samaritan, he's on the way to a life, in the kingdom. So there's all these different layers that are also interweaved with the parables that you can keep unpacking for forever, right? I mean,
Right. And the Good Samaritan is a great example of this,
mm-hmm.
because he does so many things.
Yeah.
And we don't have to concentrate. And I've often said this, during sermons, is that we want to concentrate on the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sometimes that's not what it's for.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's for the little things.
Yeah.
He takes care of he picks up the man.
Mm-hmm.
He takes him somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
He feeds them. He pays for his bill. He tells the guy at the hotel, when I come back again, I will pay for the rest of his bill.
Yeah.
He does all of these things for him. And he does this in, of course, the moral of the story is he does this to someone that he doesn't even know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
Doesn't know him.
he's the outsider who's taking care of the
right. And he is the outsider, not
right.
We can assume the guy that was injured and everything and so on was Jewish.
Right. And he's
Was
us, right? The injured guy is us.
And usually the injured guy is us.
Mm-hmm.
On the prodigal son, we have a number of people that we can look at.
Yeah.
I always say, don't only look at the prodigal son. Some of us may be like the brother.
Yeah.
Because the brother is sitting there, being a good boy and everything most of the time, doing it, and he doesn't realize what he has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I myself have felt that way with myself. Look at what we have in the church and the fullness that we have, and we complain about stuff.
Yeah. Right. I know.
It's like really,
I know.
Yeah.
And so it's like you can keep it, and it's. I'm trying to think, and you'll maybe know this better than I am. I mean, the greatest commandment, right? Is there any other rule than love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself? Like, does Christ even give any more like sort of hard guidance? It's almost entirely in language of metaphor and parable, and the kingdom of heaven is like a man who goes out and finds a pearl, and it's always just like the simile and metaphor and parable. Does he ever go like more? I don't think
No.
so, right?
No. Even when he heals someone, it's in some gospels is, don't tell anyone they're not ready yet.
Yeah.
Or in the case of the Samaritan woman, go tell everybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like, and all of
It's
that has symbolic layering too, because I was just reading,
yes.
I forget which healing it is. Oh, it's a blind man in Mark. It was a couple days ago.
Right.
And it's like, he takes him outside, and it's just these little things that can seem like throwaway lines if you're reading it with a Western contemporary mindset. You're like, then Jesus took the blind man out of the city, and then he spat on his eyes, and he's like, wait, whoa, why did he take him out of the city? It's like, well, to represent that in the city they weren't ready for the message, so he again going to the outside of the old covenantal understanding. And then it's like, so every little thing that he does is laden with meaning, and it's
And often he's looking from the outside.
right.
The healing of the centurion slave. I mean, the centurion slave. I mean, how many Jews would know a centurion? Number one, and
Right.
number two, his slave. It's
Yeah.
like, talk about outside of outside,
Right.
and the man's healed.
Yeah.
And you sort of look at that and go like, whoa, what is
What's
that all about?
what's up with that? Yeah.
Yeah. And but I really believe we still think and work with stories. I mean, we
Oh,
do this
human
with
beings are creatures of stories. We're not creatures of facts.
yeah,
Facts are incidental, I would contend.
yeah. They don't really have, facts. Who
Yeah.
cares about facts?
Well, facts are incidental. By
But
that I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's like facts are in the grand movements of the way that life unfolds. The story is what drives us, and the facts are utilized or not, to support our story.
yeah, but the story, I really think, opens us. The parable opens us up, and this is why we can do it 2,000 years later and go like, hey, I'm not going to be like the prodigal son, go out and work and with pigs and everything else. Although maybe I will. I remember 25, with 2 college degrees and a tremendous amount of vanity, working in, as a janitor. Making $3.25 an hour, and that was my highest pay at that time because I had a number of jobs.
Yeah.
And so I can relate in some ways to the prodigal son. I could have gone back to another place and made more money, whatever that means, and taken a different route. I did take a different route as far as my priesthood was concerned. But that was because of stories too. My parents told me stories about the military. My father-in-law told me stories about being in the Coast Guard. That was all connected in there. And that's the other thing. A lot of these parables have connections to each other.
Oh yeah.
They're not just like, oh, we're just going to have this one parable here, one here, and one over here.
Right.
They're connected together. They're like a package.
Yeah, it's like a lattice work.
Yeah. So you take and Jesus loves to talk about Samaritans. He loves to talk to Samaritans.
Yeah.
He likes to talk about the underdog. He wants to talk about the poor and the needy. And do the third antiphon / ... the Beatitudes / ... the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like about 8 stories there.
Yeah.
It's, and if you want to know how he feels about people, then read that.
Well, isn't it? Oh my goodness! Hold on, I have a pop up. I don't care about McAfee virus scan. Sorry. My computer was talking to me in the midst of our call. Sorry.
Oh, how intriguing for you. It's
Right?
never happened to me. Yeah.
That's because you're iPadding, right?
I am. Mhm.
Well, and it's like there's something there too, right? It's that Christ is. I think he's pushing it back all the time against our reflexive dualism or our reflexive need to categorize and organize things, in that he's always pointing us toward the margin, toward the gray area, in a way, towards the things that aren't as clear cut as we might like them to be, toward the prostitute or the leper or the unclean. And like there's something really important there in his embodied ministry and his stories. And I've been thinking this week, sort of running my background thoughts as we get ready for another show, is Christ is the Word incarnate.
Mhm.
So it's the anti-dualism. It's both things. It's not just communication, because right, like what we're doing right now in this particular medium is a relatively disembodied communication.
Mhm.
And Christ is both the communication of God and like a physical being, always, all at the same time. He doesn't, I feel like maybe it feels like, especially in the modern world, we're always like splitting and trying to come back together, splitting and trying to come back together, splitting and
Mhm.
trying to come back together. And there's something about that, like margin, right? It's like he's like, look at the margin. That, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, and also if you sort of also connect that to when Christ talks about humility in the parable of the publican and the Pharisee, we as members of the church need to look at who humility, who and what humility is, and it's Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
When he talks about um, the Samaritan, the Good Samaritan, the Good Samaritan is Jesus Christ, and so is the man who's hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he embodies those people.
Yeah.
He not embodies, but he beyond symbolizes, uber symbolizes those people,
Yeah.
those things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we need to look at that,
Yeah.
and we need to be well. I know I've probably even told the story on this. Um, Tolkien and Lewis were a part of the Inklings, and they got together and had a pint of ale and read stories to each other for about 15 or 20 years, and after teaching. And C.S. Lewis had been an agnostic, and his head got pretty messed up in World War One, and Tolkien was a devout Roman Catholic, and they were talking one night about myths and legends, and Tolkien came out with, well, Christ is the legend. He's the true myth. He is everything.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, he's not just a legend or just a myth,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
what the agnostic would say,
Yeah.
or the people that sit on the fence on their faith.
Mm-hmm.
But Tolkien, being devout, said he is the personification. He is the true myth.
Yeah.
His story is the story,
Yeah. It's the
and it's even
fulfillment.
more the fulfillment
That's
of
not even the right. Well, if you
no,
talk about filling up,
yeah,
fulfillment, right? Like,
yeah, yeah.
or
So
contains within himself, right?
right, right.
And it's interesting when you look at the way like all of the stories are told and the way that the Bible itself is written is like there's gaps. Like we in our modern writing often it's like the priest was sitting in his maroon vestment in the room with the beige curtain and a black cap, and behind him was, and it's like there's just none of that in the biblical narrative. There's just
No, I mean,
there's
there's no like,
space.
I'm reading Leclerc right now on,
Hmm.
his mysteries, and he
Yeah,
gets so deep into this stuff. Jesus didn't do that,
no, it's like there's so much
and,
space in
and if
those
he
stories.
did, it would be like one sentence.
Yeah,
You know, the man whom the Good Samaritan helped was poor and ill.
yeah, yeah. It's not this,
That's it.
so that leaves so much space, and we think I don't know. It can feel like well, that's weird writing style or whatever to us. Like it feels dry or incomplete, but it's so I think that there's space for us to enter. There's room between the
Well,
words.
yeah, there's space for everybody to enter.
Mm-hmm.
See, this is where the thing, and it strips away. I mean, I'm a lover of detail,
Yeah.
but this, when he tells a parable, when he heals, when even the crucifixion story,
Mm-hmm.
um, I mean, we're obviously not getting all of it. We're not getting,
Right.
uh, and any one of the gospel writers could have written more on that.
Oh, totally.
Um,
Yeah.
but we're getting what we need. Number one, we're getting what we need to get, and number two, it like you said, it opens the space up for us all to hear it.
Yeah.
And this is what I think the reason for the parable, for Jesus's parable, this is the reason for it,
Mm.
so that we can all hear this. We can all understand this on about 16 different levels,
Yeah.
but at least we want to understand it on his level, and which is the most important thing. And
Mm-hmm.
then we want to understand it from where we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We want to do both of those things.
Yeah. It's like not that where we sit in our modern, postmodern contexts is of no meaning, because that's the only place we can be, right? Is where we are.
Right.
But it's secondary to the story, the over story, the story of Christ. It's like we're catching up to that, or and you're talking about that space, and it's sort of what I was getting at earlier when I said it's sort of like a lattice, right?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
it's not the
Yeah.
boxes, it's a lattice or like a trellis, right? There's a lot of space in there, but in that space is where the little vines can grow up through, and they can climb on. And within all of this metaphorical language and parable and the open way that it's presented, feels to me like that's where we're supposed to get in and grow, maybe.
Well, that is where we grow.
Mm-hmm.
We don't grow in the wow factor of, gee, wow, the Pharisee was a really bad guy and the publican was a good guy. Isn't that wow?
Mm-hmm.
Or the centurion slave was healed. Wow. Most of us aren't. We're not going to grow in that space. Some people may. I'm not saying that they won't.
Yeah.
With God, anything is possible, certainly. But most of us will grow somewhere in between, or off of one of the characters in the
Mm-hmm.
parable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so one year we might be like the man that got everything, had his servant steal everything and kill his son and everything else. We might lose everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the next year, we're like the guy that saves everything. And then God comes to you and says, guess what? You need your spiritual life straightened out. You just saved the wrong thing. Yeah.
Oh.
Like
Yeah.
right now you need this and you didn't do it. you know. So I think as we listen to the parables over and over and learn about them over and over and consume them in the way that Scripture is supposed to be consumed, we realize that that often that we can in a lifetime we can be all those characters. So we fit into that lattice work. And the lattice work also lets the light in, who is Jesus Christ too. That's another one of, I would say, his main symbol. Whereas the box would not.
No, it's not. It's a closed. It's a closed system. It's a
closed system.
Yeah. It's the cells in the spreadsheet again.
Or it can be, if you're of a scientific and 19th century scientific type, could be the perpetual motion machine. That what's going to happen to it? I mean, one of two things can happen to it. One is that it's going to blow up, or someone's going to be able to plug it in somewhere and use it. But otherwise, what's it there for?
Yeah.
It's
Oh, not you. Sorry, that was Kim. I was.
Kim just came
in. Oh no, she just came in.
Hi, Kim. Hello. Oh, she just came in.
Oh, we got a official cameo on the show.
Wow. That's the first person that of course, she's the only person besides us that have been on the show.
Us and
the dogs have. There. The dogs have been.
Yeah. So.
But so the parable, I think, is all of these things you talked about, and some of the things that I talked about. It's all of these things, but more.
And
I
think that's the good thing about it, right? Is it's always more. Because again, like with the openness and the light coming in, if you have a set of rules or precepts or whatever, there's not more. There's just like get it right or don't. There's a bunch of things to ascribe to or not. Within this symbolic, metaphorical, parabolic framework, there's always more. Like that can contain infinity. Like there's a doorway into infinity. It reminds me of something I read in an insightful comment section of an article not too long ago, and they were talking about the decline of churches in America or in the West at large. And they were like, well, how are we going to get kids to come into church? And they're not interested in sitting around and talking about this dusty old book. And I was like, that's the problem, right? We're not at church talking about first of all, a dusty old book is a misunderstanding, but that's not, again, that's you got the wrong thing at the center, right? You've got a lot of things on the altar, but at the center of the altar is the Eucharist. And if you get the order wrong, well then, but we're not just talking about a dusty old book, but a way to enter into the dusty old book is through the icons, through the encapsulating experience, of course, which helps you learn how to think and experience things differently. And then, at least for me, in the short time that I've been engaging with Orthodoxy and then in Orthodoxy, it's you're reorienting your whole way of thinking and being, and like it's really weird. It's cool, but like I didn't know what to do with the Bible, and when I grew up, it was almost always you just talked about Paul, you just talked about Romans, because that's much more structured. It's much more because he's coming out of a Pharisaical background and talking to people in that context. And so it's like that's more easy to sort of like chop up and stick in a spreadsheet, even though you shouldn't. And again, like you say over and over and over, right? We've got the 4 Gospels on the altar. And everything else in the dusty old book sits underneath that. And it's literally that covers it and flows down into it. And if if you forget that that's got the hierarchical place, you get goofy, and then it just becomes a boring, weird old book that doesn't have any, like, who knows, right?
And then Jesus says, he would say to us out of the good book, as my beloved Protestant friends used to say, you want to know about prayer? God, have mercy upon me, a sinner.
Yeah.
Say that every day.
Yeah. Like, oh.
You want to know how not to pray? Take this prayer book that's 55 pages long and do it every day, and don't pay attention to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like,
yeah,
that's what that parable's about.
mm-hmm.
And
Right.
that relates to everybody.
Yeah.
It relates to everybody.
Yeah.
If you want to be a good person, if you want to be inquisitive, if you want to learn about God, look at the Samaritan woman. And you may say, the priest is crazy. Well, that's probably true too. But you look at her and listen to what she says to Jesus, what Jesus says to her. Her life symbolizes something within her community. She's had 5 different husbands / maybe husbands. She, she's a part of this semi-Israeli Jewish culture that has been assimilated into these people that have lived there for a few thousand years. And then she meets Jesus. And her whole life immediately is changed.
Yeah.
She doesn't know it yet, but she does figure it out. So the key is, do you want your life to change? Because many of us don't want our life to change.
Oh, totally.
Really.
Yeah. Like, I'm
but in her
reasonably
case,
comfortable. Yeah.
In her case, Jesus knew how many husbands she had. Jesus explained to her about the water of life. Jesus wanted her to tell her friends about him. At the end of their conversation, which couldn't have lasted more than 5-10 minutes, she knew who he was.
Yeah.
And if we could do that in our lives would be totally changed.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna stop.
Moral of the story.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop us there. I think that's a good place to wrap up. Yeah, we're right at about half an hour, and I don't really think we need to go on beyond that, because that's the point, right?
Yeah, that's the point.
That's the exit from machine world. That's the exit from that robotic, cold, dead thinking. Is through knowing Christ, and that's what we're sort of here to do. I mean, that's
what we're here for. Yeah, certainly.
Cool.
So everybody have a good new year. And for those of you who are on new calendar, you're like me, we're getting ready for the Holy Epiphany, Theophany next week. Great blessing of the water and everything. And for my old style friends and everybody, I hope you have a wonderful nativity of our Lord.
Thank you. All right. Well, everyone, with that, we're going to leave you for this week. Thank you as always for joining us. And until next time,